on the best outcome from today would be knowing how we're going to structure this document so that we can go and come back, and then each time we have a specific charge, we can come back and work on a grade level at a time, say, come back and feel like we are making progress. Well, sometimes we have to do a lot of work to see that and start actually marching through some of those things. So that would be a great outcome from this is come up with that common understanding of how to proceed with those standards work. So let's look forward. Our most concrete idea at this time that was shared was to use a sort of a template, like we have on the screen, to chunk periods of time within the course so that we can organize our standards under there and make more deliberate connections between those pieces of content, those different discussions.
Comment about this and then a subsequent comment. As a writer, I'm always interested in who's the audience I'm writing for. And I really like this approach because the audience, it seems to me, are people like you. Writing this for who are the people who are going to be teaching these courses. It's not written for me, it's not written for the students, it's written for you. And I really like the idea of that opening paragraph. I think that's going to provide a remarkably important context for what follows. So I salute the group over here that came up with this approach. And then an editorial comment, if I'm not. I stayed over last night and I called my wife and she said, well, how did it go on the first day? I had no idea what I was doing. I got nominated. Because I understand that each teacher education program in the state had nominees for the state award picked from the panel. And my director of teacher education nominated me. She reports to me. And I have life certifications in social studies and secondary schools. So I had no idea what I read some newspaper articles. That was important. I'm sitting in the middle of that. And I told her last night, I said, it was extraordinary. I said, I was at a table with some people who so deeply care about the children in the state of Missouri. And I'm really touched by that, and I'm inspired by that, and it's been a fun opportunity for me. And as soon as I say that, I can't come next time. I got 3 rock solid commitments I can't get out of it. I'll be here in December and January. I really hate missing the next session. Thank you for your praise. Sincerely, this has been very good. And by the way, I have a department meeting tomorrow, and I'm going to put on the agenda a very brief set of references about this really good experience, but how you're doing your best to prepare these young people who come to Missouri S&T ready to hit the ground doing really well in history class.
Yeah, I would, maybe I missed this the first day, but have we all reached agreement on what we mean by a standard and what that looks like and what it should be or should not be? It seems to me like that's the next step if we're going to start actually working on these, that we've got to have some agreement about what they even are. Because I have several books in my office on standards, and you really have to do a lot of synthesis to come up with what that even means after you look at a lot of stuff. And I just want to know if we're clear on what that means. Is a standard a statement? Is it just a group of words? Does that make sense? And maybe I just need that level of basic knowledge. Maybe I'm just like that. But I can't just assume that everyone has a common understanding and definition of what is meant by the word that we use so frequently.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I think we have all the general understanding that the standard is guiding the expectations of what kids across the state have to be able to do. But I think as we work through this process, we've decided that how that standard is going to be constructed we've discussed is, I think you mentioned that at some level, we do need some complete sentence structure to provide context for that expectation of student learning, but that we probably do also need some bulleted support, which I do like this particular format because I think it lets the structure of the standard be much more explicit than what we've had before. So I think we all have agreed that the standard is the basic expectation that we're going to say every student in the state of Missouri has to have at the point of graduation, and that's what we're working from. And then how we're going to explain that so it's a more clear document than other teachers have had. I think, I don't want to, I'm being premature, but in my mind, this is a really nice compromise, giving us explanation and brevity so that it's actually manageable.
And I guess I would like for our minutes to reflect then that we have agreed to a working definition, just in case someone ever asks, well, what do they even mean by a standard? And is it the same kind of standard that we have in math or English? What is even meant by that? I want people to have confidence that we share a common working definition of this most basic word that's driving all of this work.
Well, and I think what Brian said yesterday, that we are still in a very baby phase. And we've tabled a lot of discussion to address certain areas of foundation as far as the visual layout. So, we looked at through the different ways they've laid out standards in other states and how might we want to graph that in comparison to, and so, in the broader context, we just dealt with it from a broader context at first, to then deal with it on a more specific level. And the specifics haven't come in because we thought that we don't want to jump too far in advance. At the plenary session, I said, don't hurry through this. And so if we don't get that specific nail down today, I know that seems like kind of like, oh my gosh, 75 standards. I think like what Brian said, that we will eventually be marching through once we kind of get this groundwork sort of laid out, then we can figure out each rate. And I think we're moving there. And I know you probably feel a little bit lost here.
No, I feel perfectly fine with where we are, but
Okay.
I'm not wanting us to develop 75 standards today. I'm wanting us to have an understanding of what those 75 standards really mean by way of a definition, and I don't know how to make it any simpler than that. Even if we have to get Webster's dictionary out, I agree that this is what we mean by a standard, because standards mean different things to different people, and they mean different things in different states.
And they mean different things in different contexts within the particular standards you're looking at as well. Some of these, the general idea is we want to be as specifically general as we can without crossing that line into specifics. And in some areas, that means language that's fairly general. And at some points, you got to get down to particulars. And I think, as we went through last time, a lot of times, especially from the teachers, they're pulling us back and saying, you're crossing the line there to setting specifics that's going to tie hands. But that same kind of idea did not apply in the different spot, because that had to be more clear. I think there's very much the context of the particular standard we're looking at has to be taken on top of the
definition, just if you were to
Sure. I just want to, that way our group can have a definition that we feel defines what we're doing. Okay. So I have here acknowledge, measure, definition standard, and I'm skipping down to the ones it's not a ban or it's not an in-state ban. I'm skipping to the ones that actually pertain. So an acknowledged measure of comparison for quantitative or qualitative value, a criterion. An object that under specified conditions defines, represents, or records the magnitude of a unit. Do you agree with this?
Where did you get that from?
It's a dictionary app. I can copy it and put it in our minutes, whatever we want to put.
I actually love what
Was on res because, that's okay. One, I think that you mentioned earlier that to have criteria to evaluate these standards with means that we have to define what is it that we think are the key components of a standard. But I can agree with Julie in that I see that when I'm looking at our agenda, that is a next step. We just haven't gotten to that yet. And so I do think that's on our agenda to do. And I think to clearly have things like when we look at these, our old standards plugged into whatever format we want or decide on, are they measurable? Which is what Queen's just said. Do they allow for quantitative or qualitative feedback to be given to kids, for teachers and kids and parents in regards to learning? You know, can you actually characterize the learning that's going on? And then define the magnitude. Is it clear the depth of which kids have to learn that particular standard, if you will? And so we've already, with that definition itself, we've already said that there's 3 key things that we want to look at. But I think that we do, if we're going to evaluate standards, we have to point out the criteria that we're going to use to look at where are consistencies, inconsistencies, fallacies that might exist, strengths that might exist. We have to do that. So I love that you brought that up again, Kevin. But I'm kind of Julie that we're almost there, but not quite yet on the agenda. So keeping us true to the task, I think, is great.
Would it be wise to then go ask the question? The standard has 1, 2, 3 in it. It's measurable, it's blah, 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 it's blah, blah, blah. We want to say that without putting the content in the standard right now. We want to say the standard has, is that something that's a reasonable thing to? Because when you talk about the values of the standard, you talk about, is it qualitative, is it quantitative?
Does it allow for that? I think there may be more, but I'm just saying that I think that we need to do that. I agree with you. But we have to get to that point. And then there may be things besides just the definition that Wendy read that we think are important, that are kind of our checklist, if you will, as we're looking through the standards like we did last time to see. But if we have that up there, just like we did those 5 core values that were just those reminders up on the board saying, okay, well, you know, this, when as I'm reading this, it's just not swirling with me well, and so why is it? When you look back up there, oh, well, you know what? I don't think it's really measurable the way it's written. So maybe we need to look at, you know, tweaking the language because it's not measurable the way it's written. Or, you know, should it be something, you know, historical content? You know, I think this isn't giving enough for teachers. So we have to define that, but I just think I'm going to be the tabler again and say, can we wait until we get there so that we have time to really spin and hash that out?
We can do it whenever, and I appreciate that you're a taskmaster on this. I just am a random thought type person that I'm just gonna say it, and then your job is saying, that's 5 steps down.
No, but he was not, it's only one.
I guess my point of all of that is we throw out terms all the time, and you know what? I may not like how you're using that term. I may think you have no idea what you're talking about. You may think the same with me. And since this whole work centers around standards, it seems obvious that you would want to have a conversation either in the very beginning or at the point that you've talked about, or at some point, before we say our work is finished, that we can look at all 75 standards and say, they meet our definition for what we want a standard to be. Because all kids in Missouri will be held to that standard, and so will the teachers who are responsible for implementing it.
I'm just gonna put this idea up here. I know one of the things we had for our agenda was to set the future agenda, and I just don't want to lose the idea. So I was just gonna say, like, for our next agenda item, again, we're gonna have more time, like, we have to define standard.
We could easily actually.
And we may be able to,
easily do our next step.
yeah, and we might have time to do that today, but I'll just put it up there so we don't lose it, because it's really not.
And should that definition then be included in an introductory portion to the standards that are complete standards?
Yes.
Because we would need how much information.
Right, I agree.
All right.
I just didn't want to lose it, so I didn't want to lose it, and not
very disciplined.
I mean, and I kind of understand, that it seems like there's a lot of sometimes talk and not a lot of,
I know that's important though for many people, it really is.
So I need a refresh here. So we're just discussing, right?
At this point, we've given everyone a chance to discuss their ideas about Missouri standards. We're trying to come up with a firm action set that will guide all our future work as far as the structure of our standards and what our standard documents and what it's going to communicate. And currently, our only concrete plan, our best concrete plan right now, that sort of try to put people's ideas together is a template similar to this. Although we can bring in other ideas as we discuss that, but that's where we're at right now. It's an open discussion about what we want to do as far as reorganizing or trying to better communicate our standards to teachers and all stakeholders.
Okay, I have an excerpt here from the document called the State of the State Standards, which is what actually put the entire nation on this trajectory in the first place. It was the Board of Institute. And if it's appropriate, I'd like to read their section, very short, on the centrality of standards and their limitations. Is that appropriate for someone?
Does it relate to the formatting of the standards?
Yes, because then there's a section on Massachusetts and why it's number one all the time. It's important to me that you understand, I don't talk out of myself. I've studied this stuff. And when I say Massachusetts is number one for a certain reason, it's not because I want to see. It's because I've read the stuff of what put us where we are. And Massachusetts is number one because of the clarity that was in that document, which at the same time we seem to reject. Not totally out of hand, but we seem to favor more vagueness in the name of freedom versus what put Missouri in this situation in the first place. So if you're open to it, I'll share that with you, and if not, we can move on.
Floor is open as long as you feel like it's a brief.
All right, so this is from State of the State Standards. It was a 2010 document. It comes from the Board of Institute, which is basically the public relations for this whole movement. As we've argued for a dozen plus years now, standards are the foundation upon which almost everything else rests or should rest. They should guide state assessments and accountability systems, inform teacher preparation, licensure, and professional development, and give shape to curricula, textbooks, software programs, and more. Choose your metaphor, and this is where our discussion has been. There seem to be different definitions. And you're absolutely right in your analysis. There are different definitions. It says choose your metaphor. They can be targets or blueprints or roadmaps. They set the destination. What we want our students to know and to be able to do at the end of the K-12 experience and the benchmarks that they should reach along the way. If the standards are vague or watered down or misguided, they can point our schools down parallel paths. If there are no standards worth following, there is no education destination worth reaching. Everybody knows that standards often end up like wallpaper. They sit there on the state website available for download, but mostly are ignored. Educators instead obsess about what's on the high stakes test. And we've already discussed that. Now let me get down to Massachusetts. The main takeaways. What's the state of the state standards in 2010? The story gets complicated, and they talk about the singular situation. As for the singular case of Massachusetts, there we find the state that had led the nation in achievement gains over the past decade, thanks in large part to its excellent standards and their serious implementation. A similar case cannot be made for other states. We understand the position of the Missouri standards. Why fix something that is broken? In other words, Massachusetts was number one, it should be used as a model. They just decided that there were ways to make them stronger, and that the decade-old placement of Massachusetts is for the most part even stronger than the version they're using today. So the point is that it was the clarity, it was the specificity, and that's how you make a measurable plaintiff's capacity. And we had a lot of good pluses in the show me standards, but there's something to learn, and maybe that makes us uncomfortable, but Kevin keeps insisting that that's how we're actually going to reach our goal. And so we need to find a way to allow for a new depth of studying in the social studies areas that we're getting for. We need to find that, but at the same time, remember to always make it measurable disparities.
Is there a way to pull that up that document?
I'll send it to you.
You said that.
I can send it to you. I'll send it to Wendy, you'll send it to all. I don't have y'all in my books yet.
I think it's important too that any document we're referencing, talking about, keep track of that. I think that's just part of our record. So even though it's just one quote or one passage that she's referencing, it still is informative to this process, and I think we need to keep track of it. So what's next?
So,
Waiting for the process and everything.
so if I understand the Massachusetts approach, says it's really restrictive. It's going to tell you not precisely what to do, but here are the things you need to do. I was thinking of what's the proper characterization of two approaches, and remember I shared two different chancellor's versions, and the consulting firm said you have two kinds of candidates in the field. You have low risk, low reward candidates, and you have high risk, high reward candidates. I'm almost beginning to think that what we got is this dichotomy of there's a low risk, low reward approach, and a high risk, high reward. If I understand it, is it the dichotomy that is developing?
Actually, I guess the question is, what does basic mean? If you say basic, maybe you don't get it. You use the verbs like we're talking about to represent the depth across the development of the child. You state basic in your statements about what you're saying. And I think that's going to be a balancing act that we don't have a model for. I think that's going to be our contribution to space development.
So Larry brought up a good point about prescriptiveness. When you put lists like Massachusetts has, where you're telling everybody in the state, you must learn this thing. So there are content statements, like this statement sentences in there. Some of them stick to big ideas. Some of them become very specific. And then there are these lists of A, B, C, D, E through J that become very prescriptive. I think, in my own mind, that we can be more specific with especially with our history strands, and give more clarity to those, without going to the list format and telling everybody where these details things. I think one thing that will help us do that is by looking at a course not in its entirety and trying to think about those things, but by looking at time periods and taking the current standards and making them specific to a time period and being more clear about what students should have in that time period. Because we do have many standards that say you should know this reconstruction, new deal. So what should they know about those things? What are the things they should know? And we can be much more clear, and especially those history standards. And that rewrite would occur as we drop those into some structure and then have that discussion as a group about how do we fix this standard up to the criteria that we asked it to be. And that will probably be our grade level. That will be our grade level work as we look at a specific grade level and standards, how they're laid out, and what do we do with these specific words? How do we fix up these specific words out of there? And so that's going to be that detailed work that is coming with 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So we got 7 grades, 6th grades, 6th grades to struggle through with that. Which really, I think that'll be valuable work. I anticipate fixing those gaps that makes them very good work.
And I like to add, I think it's really important that we listen to the educators in the room. And I'll exclude myself from this conversation because I'm not in the Missouri classroom as an educator at least. But I think as we think about guidance in terms of where teachers can use more specificity versus guidance where teachers can kind of use a little more latitude, I think it'd be really helpful to kind of to get your voices and perspectives as we get into kind of particular content or particular kind of specifics that you guide us in terms of, listen, this standard and that's really too big, it needs to be more specific, and then we work in that direction. And, I'm going to use a little more latitude here for that. That would be really helpful, so. You'll lead us in that direction.
I think always is kind of restate what I was trying to get at it. To be able to give a standard that is helpful, we've got to give the lowest level generalization possible without getting into too many of the specifics that define the action. So if I tell someone, for your house, the standard is you have to have furniture in it, that's great and all, it doesn't really tell you much. They tell you you need to have chairs, that gives people no freedom to buy roller chairs or something with a high back or whatever. And you can also say you need to have chairs in these rooms, including a high back chair, but not limited to, and that gives direction and freedom and sets a standard without micromanaging their every step from that point out. And that's a delicate balancing act as you, depending on the topic you're discussing. And so, like I said, history, we can get more into, but this specific, you got to have that. But as you get into another strand, you can't quite get that. So it's going to be a balancing act that we've got to keep in mind, and keeping that dictionary definition handy in the back of our mind until we get it more settled, I think is important.
And just in terms of kind of pulling the conversation back to this kind of format, the format is going to allow us to do that work that we need to do. I do very much like the ability that this format provides, because it's giving us a more discrete period of time with which to work. And I think that is one of the largest flaws and differences. And you'll notice, although we're not choosing an identical outline structure that Massachusetts is using, the reason they are more discrete in their information is because it's organized by periods of time. And so in terms of, I think, all of the format ideas that we've floated, I believe this one allows us to move in that balance that gives us a local control that our state requires, and the specificity that teachers need to teach. So I really, in terms of just a format discussion, I like this format. We're gonna have difficult conversations as we fill in this. In terms of one decision that I feel really comfortable with right now, so I don't know, I know Wendy had mentioned you can have some questions about the format of how this would work, or I'd love to really kind of answer questions to that, or if someone over lunch kind of came up with a variation of that, if there are other format kind of issues, that might be a good
clear about the things about what we do with this knowledge that we're gaining. I wonder if it's really possible to say this action is geography action or economic action, or if it's just going back to those historical thinking skills again and what things we're going to research, we're going to do. So I wondered about thoughts about, say, taking this and merging that and saying these are things that can be done. These are our standards related to actions, rather than trying to say this has to be forced into a category.
Yeah.
And so that felt cleaner to me, and we would be using our social studies inquiry standards still to fill that.
Say that as well as you would have said that, tell me what you told them, we needed a footer in that section to re-summarize and maybe give some other specifics that apply across, but then limit to that, that's very good.
Okay, here's my question in the format. How, if I look at these 7 standards and I see one of them is continuity and change in the history of Missouri and the United States and the world, how does you discern those 3 levels?
And see, I'm gonna say, I know there's certain stuff here, but in the old document, what I find, the way we word this within the context of the course, that blanket statement sometimes can be confusing. So when you look at the old leads and it's worded that way, and you're looking at, I'm just gonna be quiet now, because it may read itself out, so let's just see what happens.
But
Because we've reformatted it, so it broke it.
I think we'll end up having to play with the titles, but my suggestion is that we have now a super heading. We have a super heading for this, so we're working in colonization and independence, and we would be also working within the context of a grade. So this would be 8th grade American history, colonization and independence. And so I think your subcategory then is history or changing continuity history or whatever you want to call it. I don't think you need America and World in Missouri, because then when you drop it in the box, your concept then, if it's Missouri history, it would say Missouri Constitution or, it would have to be something that would be relegated to that time period. But your Missouri, or if it's a world connection, let's say I'm working in here on independence, and I want to reference my linkage to French Revolution and the U.S. contribution to the French. I'm dropping all that down in there into that top.
In
that
here,
top
so
box right here.
this and this, both of these boxes are
We have
already
2
mapped.
opportunities.
Here's my problem.
So you're gonna have 2 locations where you can specify.
You made this the main heading, and then you've repeated it as history here, and then you've entered all of these here. Do you really mean to have history here?
That's okay.
You
could
could be just a
have
content statement.
overview.
That's what I
Yeah,
would
your
do.
next
Over-
position.
yeah, I
We
would
just,
statement.
I would
We
just
just-
say standard statement.
Yeah.
Standard statement, and then because history becomes one of the components
it's-
here
yeah,
rather than the overarching
Right.
theme.
Yeah.
no, and that's fine, and that was just a placeholder to say, this is where the narrative part, that
Yeah.
overview.
Okay, but this is what we discussed in our first meeting, is that this stuff, even if it happened in America, didn't happen in a vacuum, and that we should be talking about, we should talk about what happened in England
So,
and
yeah.
George III and get perspective for here. So can you collapse this into a single cell, or do you have to have a separate column for, the more local levels?
Well,
Would people, roots and culture
Yeah.
Good point.
bring that in?
Yeah,
That's
so,
an awesome idea, actually.
yes.
But I don't know the idea, please.
That would go to people groups and cultures, that would look more.
Yeah.
Then this is
Okay,
more
yes,
local,
you
that
might
goes
see it.
side by side with what's happening in America.
Right.
And that's always what we wanted, is to
Right.
integrate you know, we have the focus on America, but integrate it within the context of, so
Exactly.
what maybe is happening. And having it in this row is different than saying, you know, you can forget about this, we're gonna move on to what's going on in the
Right.
US. Because we can't forget about it.
No, you're right, right. Yeah, so right,
And I think that's what we were saying is once we get that framed out and start plugging them in, we have to cross-check to make sure that's happening, Mary. It's like,
Yeah, because we have to make sure that
we
it
have to cross-check
goes
it.
through, and
Yeah.
we want it to show up in more than one
Yeah.
unit of study.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna, because I mean, we would have, I don't know,
Last,
I'm not an American
last
historian.
is not work, it's just, yeah, the elementary group actually was, they, how do we make those global connections?
Yeah.
And we, I think that strand is already sort of weak.
Yeah.
It's a copy paste strand, that strand could be used to make global connections, connections with other people than what we're actually studying, so we have that larger understanding. So I think that's a great way with that.
And just to be topic picky, shouldn't government precede economics? Outcome-wise?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking from
Yeah.
large down.
You know, honestly, we could go back, I'm gonna be honest, as a teacher, you could argue any of these could go in any order and make a really valid argument on it, depending on the lens you're looking through. So, you know, I will say that if it's a course that the focus is, like 8th grade's focus is American history, that it makes sense for that history to be first. Or like geography, 6th or 7th grade is geography based, like world regional geography and cultures. To either start with the history or the geography kind of first makes sense, doing government first, but again, you could argue any of them in different orders. And
Well, I
everyone's
can
brains
see-
can work different.
I can see a good argument either way of putting geography or government first. It just seems like economics is something that operates within or under the control of a particular government. And so that should follow in line.
But some people would say that it falls into, and we can get into geography, because you're talking about human and physical systems, and then interacting to develop economic development and government, see what I mean?
Yeah, that's your point.
So what we might find is we'll just put it in the order where this particular group, where our brains roll across it most logically, you know, and go with it because it doesn't.
Yeah.
Really not.
There is no, that be 100% right.
Now,
There is not.
well, my other question is, do we want to set it and, because that will determine what goes where, do we want to set it and leave it across the grades in the same order? Which I think we should for clarity,
I would think so.
or do we change it for, yeah, so, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a region that is not insensible, and then
Yeah, and then just.
knowing that you're not making that specific statement about it.
And Wendy, I do want to just acknowledge, like, I just wanted to kind of make sure you were kind of clear on the overall structure. Like, did you have questions, or did you want me to kind of run through how this would fit together, or?
Okay, explain to me, because I'm hearing the term spiraling, and explain to me how that's actually the case.
So what this would be is let's say, one unit of study in an American history class. Let's say maybe it takes a teacher, you know, a few weeks to do this topic. I don't know, I'm not an American historian. So we would have this period of time that goes through independence, okay? And then there's gonna be
What is that
identical.
that one's blank, why is that blank?
It's
Just because it's
we-
template.
We just haven't filled it in yet, so you would have, kind of a paragraph here that would talk about, you know, the overall intent of the colonization, the independence period. We'll have some sentences there giving you sort of a summary overview. We'll drop in here and give more specific guidance in terms of historical expectations, some geographic expectations, looking at evidence that students should be able to navigate and things they should be able to do, all in this frame of colonization and independence. independence. You're then gonna have a mirror format down here that's gonna go independence to the next breakpoint, whatever that is. And then you're gonna have now history, but it's gonna be the history that makes sense for post-independence.
So these are time period groupings.
Right, and so well, what you might
Which we
find.
don't see right now.
Right, we don't have it, but you might find up here, when we're talking about independence, you might find the Declaration of Independence is really important here, but we might find that that comes back around in the second, later historical period. Maybe we're referencing that again as we're moving closer to the Civil War. Maybe some of those founding ideologies are kind of moving. So because I'm going to have in one American history class several of these categories, I may find that as I move through, while my actual history might change, so this is, I'm colonizing and I'm surviving and I'm living through Jamestown. Well, down here now, I survived, I'm independent, but I'm struggling and the Civil War's on the brink and I'm still struggling. I might find that some of my important information here is going to also be redone. Right. So you're going to be able to then weave through sort of these really important, like the geographic separation between North and South in America is really critical. It impacts our colonial development and how the colonies develop, but it's really important later on as we're moving to the Civil War. It's really important later on as we're reconstructing. It's still important in the modern day and these regional differences that are kind of geographically founded. And so you would be able to then give the teacher that guidance, but you want to tailor it to their unit of study.
Okay, so this is like the whole entire unit.
That's the whole
And
class.
you're gonna group it into this section and
Perfect.
this section.
Awesome.
Yay!
Does anyone else have questions about how this would flow or? I don't have it. I'm gonna be honest, this is harder to create than what Massachusetts has done. It's harder, but I think it's really better. It's gonna be really challenging work, but I think it's gonna be
people in this room are gonna add to the national conversation about standards. I really do. And I'm excited about it. I just want to be sure, that as we go through this kind of format, although I was not very happy with everything about New York, they have some good ideas here in 10 themes. And so maybe we want to think about those as we have already, 5 columns. Maybe do something else we like out of their ideas, that we want to add another column. Julie mentioned the arts, and they were very important in communication.
That's always reflected culture.
I see that as culture, but I also see it in the social science inquiry piece, because when you're looking at evidence resources, you may be looking at music, you may be looking at art, you may be looking at, an actual written document within the context of that time period. And so to me, that naturally comes into play when you start looking at those other strands, that you're going to see that in there.
As long as we're mindful of it, because we don't see it.
Well, and I think this row right here is going to be, probably if we end up agreeing on this format, the step is to sort of look at what we have and see what plugs in. And then we're going to, of course, have these huge gaping holes. My guess right now is that this row right here, looking at how to move through evidentiary sources and asking kids to utilize a variety of things is going to be really insufficient in our current document. Our current document sort of just says kids have to use maps and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think this would be a place for us to be really explicit, Julie, and look at trends in art and music and architecture. Like, I don't even know that you get architecture in the early, talk about the pyramids, but once you move beyond that ancient era, architecture drops out of our standards. And so I think this might be a really wonderful place for us to make a more holistic approach towards the sources that are out there that understand history.
Now we're talking about educating kids, and I'm almost scared.
We're close together too long. That's all I want to say, thank you so much.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, there is a realization in our current document, and we are thinking as a move to encouraging that. As soon as you look at a focused period of time, then the standards, allow you to make the standards come to life in a time and place where you can ask more specific things without saying, we should be able to use, or we should be able to think about. And now we're thinking about it in a time and place where we can make it come to life with actual content.
I think you made a real valid point, and well, we're using American history as an example, but remember, when we're doing geography, it may be the regional focus, it's contextualizing. Or government, it may not be necessarily your time period necessarily, you have to think, it's either time, place, topical kind of thing, it's contextualization that we're looking at, putting it into the context in which that we're framing it out. So American history made it really easy to look at, that's how we used it because of the time chunk. But like when you do world regional geography, you're looking at more modern pieces too, you're looking more at regional topics, kind of. Would you agree?
Well, even if my curriculum is Egypt, China, it doesn't go by years, so that would be topical, and then the geography aspect of it too.
Right.
Which is more beautiful.
So I just want to be careful.
Sixth, 7th grade levels here.
So regardless of the course, would the column remain the same?
Yes.
I believe it should just for.
In my example, in my thought when I made it. The thing that would be different is that narrative piece at the top. How that looks, if it's a high school government course, it's obviously not going to be colonization and independence. You know, you're really looking at, because you get into policy, you get in, there's all kinds of different things that you're going to get into. So you have to think, I know it's hard, social term, but that contextual part, when you get it there, but that, you have to think in terms of that. But the format and those columns and rows would stay the same.
And then we don't necessarily have to fill every box all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it would,
Certainly as a young.
right, I didn't think that fewer yawnings this way.
Not sure I caught that when you said that you said the periodization would fall out of it, if you were talking about, say, India.
No, you would still have periodization in there, but you won't necessarily, I don't know how to explain it, it's better that if periodization works for the course structure, we certainly should probably use it. But like in yours at 6th grade, different districts teach world regional geography and cultures at different grade levels. It's either 6th or 7th grade, you can flip. My district teaches the geography course in 7th grade. Her district does it in 6th grade. I'm not sure, what do they do for you, Kevin and Lebanon? Do you teach world history in 6th grade or?
Yes.
Okay, so 7th grade is world geography. You're not doing world geography through periods, you're doing that more regional. So that contextualization up there would be by region. So
Right.
topic, not
So
by
up
period.
here,
It's more modern, you do some history.
So this
Or
box, can I ask a question? Like, why do they do that? Why do schools do that? Why do they have to do it that way?
Well, currently, the way it's, that's a discussion we can have, I guess, but I would like to go back and do the research. I would like to know the research as to why originally there was an opportunity for the flip, or the decision to make which is which, before I would just randomly let us make a decision. I think while we're talking, we may be able to, but I'm the type of person that I like to have the historical background before you make a random decision.
I'm just curious why standards
They're so unclear.
I'm just,
What is the question? Is
Well, I think we have to geography in 7th grade and social in 6th grade.
I'm just unclear on why saying regionally, talking about trade routes or, no,
Well,
what did you say, geography of the regions?
so in
Why that wouldn't
Yeah.
fit in that?
Well, in geography courses, you're typically approaching the teaching of a geography class, which in the state is either 6th or 7th grade, from a regional perspective.
Right.
Because you're moving all the way from earliest beginnings of that region of the world, all the way into the modern era, and you want to be able to move within that region, and also cover every region of the world. And so the way most teachers have addressed that is by creating these constructs where you're gonna have Latin America as here, and then we're gonna move through this in terms of Latin America.
But you would still be doing Latin America in
The history of it.
prehistoric.
Yeah, and this is still gonna be, so,
Okay.
but we may find that as we move, the content statements are gonna look different depending on the course we're in, because
Right.
they need to. I
But
mean,
you would still be
Right,
on
like
this
we're
general
not,
format
yeah,
structure.
so, yeah, we're just not gonna have, like, if we choose
A world where
colonization and independence, that would be the title in every class.
Right.
Like, another class might be Latin America, or.
But boy, you would have that class down after 12
Right,
years.
we're like, I'm just
Yeah.
doing years, like, I'm knocking it out. So, yeah, no, it's same exact format,
Okay.
just the nature of the course might, move that top bar, like, it won't be the same years for every course.
Right.
Yeah.
Not is premature to make some decisions.
No,
So it's recent about whether we agree on some things. What do you think, Chair?
so I.
So, I agree is making a motion that we agree in principle working to a template that can be changed. I'm gonna add some language
That's fine.
that can be changed as needed, but agree in principle to a template that would guide our future work by grouping courses by topics, so that we can make connections between standards within that topic, within that. Would anybody like to second?
I second.
Motion. All in favor of moving forward with that? Say aye.
Aye. Is that unanimous?
And any opposed?
My question is, it's a template, not a final.
I added words to Wendy that this is our working template.
It's our working format that we're.
And you guys like it.
Any opposed? Okay.
She speaks right to the six.
Do you abstain? You don't want to vote with yea or nay?
The chocolate chip cookie is sitting in a fog. I'm you guys right now. I'm like, trying to get that, but, if you all are comfortable with it, and that's, as you said, standards have been very unclear. And that's part of the issue that we're trying to address, to make more clarity, as there's some clarity, and you guys like the clarity of this. I'm comfortable with that. So, our layers.
Thank you. A next step, very similar to what we did last time when I first suggested that we group the standards by grade level, not columns, and suggested a more horizontal approach, which is still here, is to then take a set of standards, sort of plot them in, not changing any words, but just putting those standards where they might fit within that template, and then bringing that to this group so that we can see it in practicality. And so I might suggest that we move forward in our next meeting with looking at sixth grade, being our first one. And I would volunteer to basically do it as last time, so we cut and paste our current standards for sixth grade into a template like this. Then we can look at it, and then that would give us a working document with which to edit wording, to create clarity, to look at holes within that course, that standards that just not exist, that we feel need to be there, maybe to eliminate duplications. All that would be open for actual discussion and work towards one grade level using this template. Do we feel comfortable with that homework and coming back on November 10th with that?
So we'd all be reviewing that on our own and back and compare notes and.
Are you going to email then your sixth grade? So you're going to actually do, just
So I would
put
go
some
ahead
in
with this
to
time.
edit. You're gonna put some in to edit, and then for sixth grade, and we can maybe go over that as homework. If it's sent through email, and look at it.
We could certainly set it, a part of that could be, it would be done by this date, to be emailed out to the groups, the group can preview it for discussion.
Were you not wanting to do that before November 10th? Maybe I'm asking, I think I'm not clear on your intent as to when you want to have that.
I would say, I could either take the template and copy and paste our current standards into it,
Okay.
by November 10th, or I can do it earlier so the group has time to look at it before we meet.
I'm gonna be honest, if you do it by November 10th, that would be perfect. Because I am not going to, I won't have time to really review it, and then you can have a bunch of days for your copy and paste. If you want to just have it by November 10th, it's up to, I don't know, is that okay? Does everyone else, I mean, do you guys have time, or do
Do
you?
we get time to preview it, or maybe not?
If you get it done in advance, fine.
Yeah, okay.
If you're able to get it done before then and send it around, I think it'd be great for people, if you can get the time to look at it, and if not,
Yeah.
we can come here and work through it.
So our editing work will have to be done in common,
Right.
but any work that's not changing anything, just putting it in a way that allows us to work forward is getting a lot of progress done.
Right.
Like
We do it just for grade 6, right?
just for grade 6,
Yep.
I think it'd be a lot to say that you've done with the whole grade level today. But I would sure go out and have some ice cream.
Are you buying?
Shall we put that down?
You put that out, we're supposed to get a, we need an ice cream budget.
So if we finish sixth grade on November 10th, I heard Brian say he was done.
I second that motion. I heard it too.
So Mike, that pose a question, so is this the point where we can raise questions about content
Yes, I think that,
of these current standards?
Noticing their place in the template, that would be a perfect place to address content and wording and the specificness of the words, and what we're asking students to do. And sort of toe that line between telling people, you have to teach this way, or you need to teach this, or we're not sure how we teach it. The specificness.
My approach would be just to raise questions about why it's this and.
Right.
right.
Which I think we can do that.
Yeah, and I think this will be the best place to do that. Yeah, I think it'll be great, like, and why are we, or is it gonna be an entire huge version of that? I'm just kind of just giving us ideas for our next agenda, so we begin by reviewing sixth grade at the next meeting, or in advance, so probably not meeting, I would know. And then we would be discussing, this would be pretty heavy discussion, so we would be discussing then, content concerns, wording concerns, levels of specificity, verbiage, in that language, areas that have been omitted or overdone, like this will really be a very meaty discussion, but we'll at least have a template, like we'll see
Something to work from.
in common. And I would guess that would take our entire day.
I really, thinking about what Kevin said about defining the standards, I'm seeing this as a great agenda for that day. Walking in, we know we're gonna define the standards, we will create that criteria, we're looking at what was plugged into the template with these goals in mind. That's a meaty topic. I love that we are already focused and ready to go, so we can walk in and get going.
And maybe we bring to that meeting our definition, our research on what the standards are.
That could be the
This is
homework.
homework, actually,
And possibly, whether this is of any interest or tolerable, I have no idea. But they have, Larry not gonna be able to be here. If you're able to get any chance to look at this, maybe you can send some suggestions in, even though you aren't gonna be here.
No ice cream for you.
No, I think it's the other people anyway.
Larry, you have Skype. If you free time during the day, we could set up a computer and,
Put you on the big screen.
put you on the screen. Should we look at the idea?
You should
Well,
scratch,
screen,
scratch that though.
We could just call you and put you on speaker. You know, we could do that.
If you would like for us to take them away, take them to you as much as possible, just. Yeah.
See if they, it's about like, one that I go to, says Jamie, I mean, a lot of us have.
We can do a Google Hangout.
At the moment, there's no cost.
Then it was making costs. But Google
Oh,
Hangout.
right.
Would you like to find out how to go to a meeting and then we can talk about the best way to.
To make sure that's,
I was thinking.
that is within the sunshine days.
Well,
Just to check it out.
totally understand about sunshine and language. Because the meeting is public, and he's a part of the meeting, but it's public,
Right.
and everyone could be in this room, then I think we can.
And it actually says that in the same next to the document, they said that he could even vote via Skype, FaceTime, email.
Because the meeting itself, where it's tricky is if we as a group just have a Skype meeting.
Right.
Without a physical location, because then no one else can ping.
I get it.
But because we are meeting and he's joining our meeting,
Right. Is it okay to email that response?
We can have.
In his situation?
oh, we could.
I talked to Chris yesterday.
That's, I mean,
We
with
talked
what he has going on,
according to each other about those
As-
goals
as
today,
is-
so we sort of know where we're at.
but he could check emails.
Yes.
Okay,
You know,
so yeah, we can do that, we can do that, and then we can just include the correspondence in our minutes.
Right.
And then that's, yeah, right.
Yeah,
And then
that's
you don't
something
need to
to
do
talk
anything
about
else.
when we get to.
Subject, yeah, that's matter for 6th grade.
I'm not sure we'll finish, I mean, I want to.
Sure help.
Yeah.
I don't know that we will finish.
Can I ask what Sabrina's question? There's these separate documents that actually hit what Leslie and I said yesterday, that reading and writing for social studies. Do we want to add them as a line to the table?
I think it's part of it already.
That is what we want to accomplish.
We may need to-
Was that in that final column?
Well,
Is that the same thing as evidence-based claims? I'm not sure.
but, well, it's the writing piece or informed civic action. This is where we said the title we might want to change. I was taking that from the 5 things that we all agreed on
Yeah.
at the beginning and throwing it, but that's where I said, when you're talking about reading, you know, in social studies, that's kind of in my mind, that's when you're looking at those evidentiary sources. You're looking at primary sources, secondary sources, maps, graphs, tables, charts, all those things. That's when you're talking about the reading of in social studies. The writing or communicating might also be through speaking. That goes into kind of an action piece, so to speak, in my mind, but we can combine. But that's kind of what those place markers were for, in my opinion, and I think that's where we all were.
Okay, I'd like to suggest that we make it a separate column underneath to be sure that it's targeted at everyone. Because that is the nation plan.
Well, I think you'll see it in the standards part, that's where you'll see, when you plug them into the different things, that's where you're gonna see that. So I guess what I'm saying is, I don't disagree with you, it needs to be outlined, but I think it's going to be, so.
Okay, now that's where you're gonna get in trouble with the verbs, and telling them how to teach within the standard versus writing a theme, teach it anywhere, but not writing somewhere. You know what I'm saying?
No,
Well,
I don't.
yeah. In the individual cells, you become so prescriptive, you say this is the way to do your assignment. Write a
No,
paper.
that's not what I'm saying,
Okay.
that's not what I'm saying.
We put a standard or like a standard or.
Right, I just wanna make sure we don't have these anymore. We don't have separate documents out of the standards. And somehow when we organize the tables.
No, no, I see it in there
Okay.
as well.
All right, I'll wait for you.
I'm agreeing with you, but we may need to tweak the language on the left-hand column to make sure that it's clear.
Yeah, it's not clear now. I mean, because I don't see it.
But because there's not, I'm saying once those cells are filled in, it may bring clarity to where we change that title. I see it reading itself, or it actually forming itself a little bit once we do that. And if not, I wholeheartedly, I think every educator in this room agrees with you that we have to be clear about reading like a historian, political scientist, geographer, whatever, in writing. We agree.
I'm just gonna keep this in my little notebook.
Please do.
The usability of the templates, what we need to add back to it, will all sort of evolve out of the
Yeah, I think
discussions,
so.
next time as we actually look at grade level. And that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's the fun stuff,
Right.
actually, is getting to do all the stuff we've been talking about all this time, and making them, constructing these, what the whole is.
So is the end product, the next time, once there's agreement on content, wording, specificity, verbiage, at the end is when we'll see the creation of the paragraph in the box at the top. So, or does the paragraph precede?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I bet we'd be able to do the paragraph after we construct the grade level.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
I think
It's
so.
culmination of.
Bring it back at different stages, consider all the mistakes and that's fine.
I think
So
so.
we can decide to.
Yes.
We can do it right now.
We'll know a whole lot more about what we think the class is about after we.
Yeah, what emerges.
Yeah, and that's
after we
kind
shape
of
the
the problem,
class.
that's what I'm saying, is that we'll probably.
We have an hour and 10 minutes. And one thing you could accomplish with an hour and 10 minutes is to take the history skills that we've been talking so much about and coming up with sort of a differentiation, scaffolding of those skills so that we can use that language as we move forward and use them in our 6th grade next time. That would sort of look like what skills do we want to emphasize for students that they should be doing, and then we can come up with a list and then narrow them or combine them as we see fit. And then how does that skill become more complex as students go from middle school to high school? That could be something that would be, I think, a good use of our time between now and 3 o'clock.
Where are you at in our orders of things? I'm trying to clarify. Are we following
We're off
that?
the list.
We're off the list. Do we
Brian,
want to try to go ahead and fill out the definition of the standard?
can you put previous version back up, or did you like that up? I just want to set and put.
Brian, Wendy asked, if we wanted to do there, or if we wanted to extract and define the
Do you
standard.
want to go ahead and give the definition?
I do not have a preference. That was an idea. So
For what?
would we like to work on defining standard with our last hour, or would we like to talk about those social studies skills, those history skills, with the last hour? Where do we feel like we're intellectually capable of going?
Well, I would like to put out there that it's very important to certain members of the group that there is a set definition, so any process.
Should we do that first?
So I think to me that's important because it's almost like it's a barrier we have to get past before we can mentally go to the next step, so, I think it's important.
Well,
So,
then I'm gonna propose that we do that, and then if we get done before 3 o'clock, that would be a good stopping point.
okay,
Right.
So if we feel like accomplishing that, and either 3 o'clock or whenever we finish that conversation would be a good place to end our time today.
And I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what
Based on that.
did Lenny say?
that we go ahead and
Define standards,
Okay.
because that was kind of next on our list anyway, that we like were
that's what I was wondering.
And, so then we might just be able to come in and really get moving on it.
Do you want to go from what I read? Do you want to go from, do Mary
Why don't you read it again, so I can
read it again?
put that.
You wanna type it and I don't want to read it.
All right, and acknowledged measure of comparison. For quantitative
semicolon, a criterion. Period, an object that under specified conditions defines. Comma, represents, comma, or records the magnitude of the unit.
There's definitions in.
It's from the dictionary after they have on my iPad. The next, it's a period and it says a degree or level of requirement. Comma, excellence. Comma, or attainment.
Take a minute and think about that definition, and if you feel like you would like to look at other definitions, that you
Can you make that bigger? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a lot bigger.
That's around 40. Thank you.
So if you'd like, just take a minute to think about that, and look at other definitions that you might bring other ideas into that. I think we'll use it, put it in our notes.
I've got one from, it's education based, and it's and it calls it learning standards, are concise written descriptions of what students are expected to know and be able to do at a specific stage of their education.
That squares what we have to talk about third page.
Yes, it does, that's what I like that.
What's the last one?
At a specific stage of their education. And it's from the glossary of education terms.
And it goes on to say, they describe educational objectives, i.e. what students should have learned by the end of a course, grade level, or grade span, but they do not describe any particular teaching practice, curriculum, or assessment method.
Love that, we have it.
Yeah, keep going. I can get it past objectives.
Here, I'll just get it. Oops.
These
Folks, take care of the last.
Yeah, it's all. And glossary.org. It's a site, given by Great Schools Partnership.
Say that again, source.
It is edglossary.org. The title of the webpage is The Glossary of Education Reform for Journalists, Parents, and Community Members. That says created by the Great Schools Partnership. That you have
I know it's a great resource because that book, it's just a book of educational glossary terms, and it defines every word in education, basically. And what I like about it is that it gives us a common understanding. It's called the Glossary of Education. Now, again, that's just a starting point. We can tweak it. Once we get
It's edglossary.org.
Yeah. And then with that, it also goes on to say, while learning standards vary in content, purpose, and design from state to state, most standard systems in the United States share a few common attributes, and it lists what those are. Subject areas, learning progressions, educational goals, content, and content. And then they kind of give
Can you go back? Those attributes.
subject areas. Learning standards are typically organized by subject area. Learning progressions. In each subject area, standards are typically organized by grade level or grade span. Consequently, they may be called grade level expectations or grade level standards. And the sequencing of those are called learning progression. Oh, I like this. There are two main characteristics of learning progressions. The standards described at each level are intended to address the specific learning needs and abilities of students at a particular stage of their intellectual, emotional, social, and physical development. And standards reflect clearly articulated sequences. Well, I want to read all this first. I don't know that it matters, but it's kind of interesting. The standards reflect clearly articulated sequences. That is, each grade level learning expectation builds upon previous expectations while preparing students for more challenging concepts and more sophisticated coursework at the next level. The basic idea is to make sure that students are learning age-appropriate material and the teachers are sequencing learning effectively for avoiding the inadvertent repetition of material that was taught in earlier grades. I mean, and it goes on like that in for each of the other attributes as well.
What's the current social science inquiry standards don't do? They're the same every year.
Yeah, there are really important things that our standards are suggesting students do, but never given an opportunity. Or never clarify what more they can do beyond that initial statement of that. Got a lot of information there.
Now, I would think that is a pretty good working definition, but I think we maybe need to go a step further and ask, do our learning standards, do they fit that definition, but also, do they have some attributes? Are they clear? Are they coherent and manageable? Do they focus on essential concepts and skills? Do they allow for greater instructional rigor at deeper levels of knowledge? Those kinds of things.
Oh, actually, they might be able to make a rubric out of that.
Yes.
Keep us cognizant of what it is each statement should be able to do.
Because really, in doing that, you are building into the process of quality control.
Let me tell you something, about that state of the state standards document. I have publicly criticized it because what they did was take a handful of experts who are unidentified and say, as the procedure section expert, sat down with this rubric and came up with this grade system for the states. In research, you never would have done that. You would have set up 2 committees independently researching, used the same rubric to score these state standards, and then come together and say, what's the reliability between the 2 groups? What I was told was, well, that's the way we do it in Washington. And I said, you know what? That's the problem with Washington. Because when you have the responsibility of saying to a state, you need to change your standards, you need to explain how you came up with that. Why you should adopt somebody else's standards rather than rewrite your own. What is the benefit of that versus revising your own? And why didn't the standards or your decisions match the NAEP scores? And that report never explains why it doesn't match them. Why for some states they're given a very low rank if they have high NAEP scores. And it doesn't explain why you didn't tell the states go back and rewrite your standards rather than adopt the concept. And the reason I tell you that is because you need to be very confident that in what we're about to do, we're exercising a more local level of control, and I think we're going to come out with something superior to anything in the nation. I do believe that. So, if you get a chance to read Appendix A, know what their procedure section said, what it lacks, and what we're going to be able to do. This all gets back to, if we set up a set of rubrics for ourselves, we're going to be able to say how we came up, with evaluating ourselves. And then we can form 2 groups even out of this group and evaluate ourselves using the same rubric and then checking if we have the same impressions. That's awesome. We can do a better job.
We can do 2 things to help us develop those. We can sort of break down the group, or we can get into groups, or have small discussions in the back. And talking about, that everybody has preferences on how we come up with these based on the definitions that we can speak to that. Criteria for somewhere. I think it's together.
This also addresses, are learning standards too prescriptive or are they not prescriptive enough? You want to know what it says about that?
Is that written as a caution?
Yeah, well, no, it's well, let me just read this. In the view of some educators, learning standards are too prescriptive, detailed, or numerous, can reduce a teacher's professional autonomy, instructional flexibility, and responsiveness to student learning needs. In this case, standards may be perceived as a burdensome checklist that teachers need to work through. Other educators, however, believe that the very fact that standards are prescriptive or required is what makes them effective. In this example, learning standards may be seen as a way to improve educational consistency and quality across a complex system that includes both more effective and less effective teachers, or as a way to protect students from the long-term personal and societal harm that may result from low educational expectations and low quality teaching.
That's the dilemma we've been talking about all day, isn't it? Finding somewhere in the middle that isn't so prescriptive and burdensome that it gets a checklist.
And that would be an editing issue, really.
It will come out of our standard for next time as we.
We'll have to go, that's a little too much.
No, what's interesting now is if when we got the first draft done, we took it back to your teachers and your schools.
There's
Brought it back to
cheers.
us.
Yes.
And then you can say it was field piloted, you know, in some way, you can take it back and say to your teachers, can you implement this? Give it a lesson, see, what do you think? Did you do this? Or what recommendation did you make? That, I think that's a very, it's a good strengthening exercise.
And depending on how states structure their learning standards and related compliance requirements, there could be a wide variety of potential debates and criticism related to compliance obligations, including whether schools have sufficient time and funding to meet these requirements, or whether teachers have been given the training they need to modify their lessons and bring them into alignment with standards. We are in a role.
Do we want to have individual conversations that come back to large group, or just as large group, feel those attributes of learning standards that we like to use to move forward next time?
Well, the question for this audience is simpler better or is more complex better?
I guess my question to you then would be, getting into the frameworks, what do you mean by simpler, what do you mean by complex?
Simple, clear sentence, or 2 to 3 sentences with attributes that Kevin has identified. What would make it easier for you guys?
To look at different criteria.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as teachers.
So if we're, do you mean in the, are you talking about the scoring guide that we would use?
No, just the definition of what a standard is.
Less is always, well, I would rather it be like a bullet point of, is it measurable, or, and you could look at levels of that, you know, is it weakness, is it, so when we're looking at, is it measurable, is it, you know, I would have to go back up to the criteria, but I did like the,
I think, and I'm gonna just be blunt here, the teachers in the document that we create, I do think that it's good for them to understand our rationale
right,
of how we define a standard, but they don't actually get to pick
no,
the standard, so I don't think they need a very complex.
no,
Like, we might want something a little more fully developed so that we can, you know, as we're making decisions, we can actually be like, well,
right,
maybe here's why I like it in this committee. But to be quite honest, once this rolls out and it's approved and becomes the state standards, they need to understand why we chose it, but they don't get to evaluate it.
But was your question more of the standards themselves? Should
I
they
wasn't
be
sure.
more complex or more simple?
For
Was that what you
the
were meaning?
people who would be executing this, as well as teachers, is it better to have a simple, clear sentence, or is it better to have that complexity? And you're suggesting that simpler is better, but maybe you could do like all academics do, we vary the explanation in the footnote.
Of why we should, how we, I'm in a practicing teacher way, if I don't actually get to create a standard, I'm gonna say highly motivated people or people struggling with the document are benefited by that, everyone else, and we're just getting into what the standards are, because that's what they.
But if they were curious, then there's a footnote explaining.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And like we mentioned, there are a couple things that we really want to include and sort of kind of like a preamble. You know, and I certainly think how we're defining the standard is good there. I don't want to even say necessarily where it is. I think our working definition needs to be larger, probably.
Right.
For the preamble.
But let me clarify something. It's not exactly true that they don't look at it, but they'll see it in public hearings. And
Right.
There's a legislature phase to this too, and people will be able to have input. I'm saying that if you want the best positive response publicly, that at some point you should take this, a sample, it doesn't have to be the whole thing, and they don't have to have the rubric to grade it. But you think about a sample of what it is you're writing and say, is it worth it?
Right, and try to increase the public input.
Exactly.
You know, not everyone takes time.
Right.
Also, you know, once we'll get a feel for when we actually have enough for student
Right.
maybe, I think that's really important. And in terms of the complexity or bulleted style just in general, that's one of the reasons I really liked this format we agreed on, because it does both. And so title, so we have that, but it's also going to be condensed enough that the number of pages is not going to exceed 5,000. And I'm saying that not even really facetiously. I mean, some of these standards and documents that we get are really astronomically long that no one could ever feasibly resume. I'm gonna, my brain is eating mush in the afternoon, so I don't, do we want to do this as a whole group or a small group or just wait, like, I don't, like, I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, good, I like the definition. Great. Check, like, I really want to.
If we look at it as
Where I am.
If we look at it as like a rubric, though, what would help us? If we look at it from that perspective, then there's a whole different, like here, I agree with you, like, oh, it sounds pretty good. You know what I mean? Right. But if it's a rubric for us to guide us through each thing, make sure that I do this, then we know there are certain things that must be included in our definition, right? So as we're looking at because we're gonna need to make sure each part is included.
Okay, so.
For as an example, one of those would be the standard focuses on essential concepts and skills, right? Because that's what it's all about. The standards are indispensable in Missouri. All kids have to meet them, from SPED to advanced placement students. It doesn't differentiate all kids.
So we're kind of doing this one thing we would be talking about when we're doing the world thing. This is actually essential.
Yeah, which is, that's going to be very interesting because how are we going to know that? I mean, I know we're all very smart people, but my goodness, to determine what is most critical for all Missouri students, that sounds like a big task. Sounds
Well, it does, however, I think that the requirement of educators in the room is having to, had to be taught within the subject area for 10 years. If we can't define the essential, we really shouldn't be here.
well, I know.
Yeah.
I think some of the ways when you're trying to determine essentialness, doesn't lend itself to learning something right. So can I use this to build knowledge? Right. Does it set foundational understanding, or does it allow me to branch my knowledge into other areas? Right. So I think kind of in my brain when I'm thinking of what is essential, I do think that maybe those kind of two subsets would make it, it's not just going to be intuitive. Like we intuitively know as an essential. But if we're out there on the fringes, maybe those are the questions we can ask. Is this an essential foundational knowledge that lets us build upon and become more sophisticated?
I guess that's why you sort of have content and process standards.
But I think content is foundational, and I think skills can be foundational. So, you know, is this foundational? Might be a way to think about essential.
Yeah.
You know, is this something that is built
That a base?
So aside from I like being essential, there were other things up there. What else did we clear?
Yeah, but it's clear. It makes sense.
So let's say clear, and concise, as concise as possible. Pleasurable, I can measurable.
What resonated with me too was the, when you were recording, you said it was reduction of the magnitude, so it's like the depth in which the learning has to go.
So, let's say,
So kind of go and measure
what expresses required depth.
That's where I get into timeline.
Well,
They go together, I agree, they need to be appropriate.
Yeah, to me, there's a development like appropriate
but every standard will have varying levels of depth. TPS or whatever, you would have a depth of knowledge 1 through 4 on all students.
Okay, and here's what I'm going to say. Yes, we can get to that actually label depth of knowledge 1, 2, 3, 4, but I also think I'm gonna go back to work student for a couple days who worked with the cognitive level in which they're trying to go, how they need to think, to be able to do, so that the level of thinking as well as the level of doing. And so I would say depth of knowledge / thinking and learning, because, and get away, I'm not using the cliche DOK level. Here, when I say that, I'm truly about how we can think.
Okay, that's a little confusing, because when I think of DOK or depth of
Well,
knowledge,
and I didn't say,
I'm thinking of Norman Web's design that IEP reports back.
well, and that's why I was careful not to use depth at first in my life magnitude, because it's really the level of thinking, and learning that has to happen rather than just reassuring. Because I really, this is my own perspective, but that the cognitive process, I think when you really get to really understand, if you say analyze, what is it that kids really should be doing when they analyze, they also get a whole different level of learning that goes on in the classroom. And that sometimes is the gap that exists in understanding standard. It's not the content, it's not the specificity, it's the level of thinking that a kid has to do that they were not even tuning into.
But don't you think in order to be fair to teachers, though, if a standard specifies the word analyze, don't you think we should tell them what we mean by that?
That's what I'm saying, that's what I'm saying, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Language here, because what you said is what 90% of people reading this on down to this one, and that's what we're saying.
Yes.
So I've crossed that out, and I have expressed developmentally appropriate and magnitude of specifics on writing. Just, and that's, I think, you know, we're gonna define, so we say, you know, we're gonna define what that means.
We're doing that our school, right?
And that's what teachers that works for. Yeah, and we did that the first day we worked through, and then all of a sudden it was like things started to flow. And we had a graphic that was talking about, okay, now remember, analyze means to break apart and look at those parts in relation to each other and into the whole. I mean, you can't, and then the same thing like apply so that we're all on the same page. And so we do have to make sure that's well communicated, easily identifiable in the standard.
So that's gonna be really meaningful to a teacher who's in the middle school versus the one who's teaching senior level. That's gonna be really important there.
Well, I think it's the one point I think we all kind of immediately said, I don't think we fix this.
Right.
We can at least create a middle school expectation of senior.
Right.
That's
That's where you start to feel
the
the
that.
Right. And we actually sent out a document that I had actually used with teachers and, you know, districts I worked with.
Are you taking that?
The cognitive, yes,
Yeah.
I think that's also a lot. See, that's what you're on my table.
Is that analyzing one discipline may require something else in another discipline. In other words, you can't just say analysis means this in math, it means the very same thing in English.
Well, it should.
Marzano will give you very specific examples of his vocabulary, the common words, for example, and he will show you why synthesize means in each of the subject areas.
When you express,
Right.
but not when, I'm talking about the cognitive process in relation to what kids are actually doing. So you have to think about what does the kid have to do with the information they're learning in his mind. So analyzing in each subject area should be the same. The way a kid has to break down the information and what they do with it as they analyze the mind is a little bit different. But the cognitive process should be the same. That's what we're saying. Yes. That's all right. Yeah, I know.
So for
We want to see instead of we want to tell teachers exactly how much of this would be collected.
What's that?
We are just
We're discussing magnitude.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like,
magnitude better than analyze, but it has
it's
that
not
same
very super.
cookie.
No, we're gonna have to tweak that, but I think we're all on the same page that we agree we have to have some sense of terminology there.
Were there any major other components of what we would use to judge a standard? We have, that it's essential content and skills, clear and concise, measurable, expresses developmentally appropriate magnitudes for thinking, and we're not super excited about this phrase magnitude.
I did like that, they do not describe any particular teaching practice or assessment method. I think we need to watch for that.
Neutral, instructionally neutral.
So it's not too prescriptive, and then.
So let's put it in a non-negative. It is
That's why I said
devoid
neutral.
of, let's say,
Neutral, instructionally neutral.
instructionally neutral.
I don't know that that makes sense to me.
Really?
Yeah, because I would think more.
Just say standard, they do not specify curriculum or instructional methodology.
Or assessment, it says that too.
Does not prescribe curricular instructional.
Then there's something else that we're missing too that's important to a lot of people. If standards apply to all students, they should be equitable.
Well, and I would say value neutral, okay, because that's what people get.
So we want.
It's all talking about the actions.
These are second things that are not prescribed, so we're not
Oh,
prescribing
no, I get that, I'm just trying to think, we're getting a lot of words, it seems like there should be one that would
Right, I
cover
think,
that, does not describe teachers' actions or,
I
when a
think
standard starts getting too large and trying to put in too many particulars, and I think we're missing something.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
okay, I think value neutral / equitable, I think you can put those together as we look at them. Myself.
And again, I'm envisioning this to be kind of our school.
Right, I do.
As we're thinking about, like, when we get into the nitty-gritty, and some of us are saying yes, it's a standard, and some of us are saying no, then this is where we'll go and kind of be our referee. We're gonna just mark down our checklist of,
I like the word key points.
What do you mean by value?
Well,
Because that's really not the same as the equitable.
yeah, I want to tell you that looking at our own standards, I have a concern that there is a skewing towards a worldview, and why there's a teaching of only one worldview, humanism, in our standards, not other worldviews. And that becomes the bone of contention for people.
Yes.
I just didn't hear that.
That becomes the bone of contention for people, that you would teach one worldview and not another. And we need to create standards that are not going to be, let me put it this way, if we live in a diverse society, we have to respect the diversity. And in that, we have to give teachers in a value neutral standard, we give teachers the opportunity to present the information in a manner that's culturally sensitive to the children in their classroom. And that would include the value systems that, I'm going to put it out there, that in one group will be offensive to their faith values, and in another group might be offensive to their personal situations. We have to find a way to state our standards in a manner that allow the teachers not to inform children, to educate them, but not to offend. And
I'm gonna suggest that actually what you're talking about is down here is this It's not, then it's out, and I don't know that standards in and of themselves are offensive or not offensive.
I can look at the Ohio standard and tell you there's some things that are different.
Okay, but,
Right,
but
but
I
I'm
disagree
trying to
with you.
judge, I mean, if we're looking at a standard and we're raising that concern, I think that particular concern comes back to this. Is this essential?
Right.
I don't, like, when I'm reading this, I'm thinking in terms of equitability. Like, I don't, I think you need,
We need to ensure that the standards apply to disadvantaged students,
Right.
minority
Right.
students,
like,
female
the way you're
students.
describing,
I mean,
don't
that's the
think
equity that I'm talking about.
Yes.
Right.
And
Because there's a whole,
Like,
there are a lot of people
To
who
give you an example of how that can flash point over, I would say that that description is value non-neutral. Because that is mentioning these people, and you're not gonna be mentioning inevitably other people. Whereas if you said that the quality of these standards were focused on developing the essential ideas necessary to understand how to live a free life, whatever it may be, then that's something that doesn't particularly apply to any one person. It applies to everybody. And so that's,
See, I just see I think from a social studies educator's lens, when you go back to what you said about non-neutral, if you're thinking about if things were included in there, that's the assumption that we're getting to such specifics that there's certain people or values being put in there. That goes back to kind of with Jamie, looking at essential content or, the conciseness of it. That's what we have to have, it goes kind of overlap too. So are we targeting specific groups of people, content, that kind of thing? Or are we ensuring, so there's gonna have to be a balance, which Mary, I'm agreeing with you that we do have to be careful with that. And some of that does go into the curricular instruction, assessment, methodology piece too, that is outside the scope of what we're doing. So I think it's semantics, I think we're all kind of in the same area. Equitable is a term that I think most of us in the classroom and buildings use often to think of in terms of creating a balance of where things are, that kind of thing. So when I'm reading it, I would be thinking equitable, but if you have a different word that works for you, I'm okay with the slash, I guess is what I'm saying. As long as, I'm sure we're gonna have to have conversations on some of those. There's without a doubt.
Yeah,
Well,
but
and
I think
how
much
much
learning
learning
this is gonna be involved in like learning.
Because if we're choosing content that's relevant, that's essential, it will be balanced. It will not be so prescriptive that you're drilling down to struggle the hand of a specific teacher.
Right.
But I don't think that it's wise to look at something and say, as our guiding principle does it state, is it potentially offensive?
Right.
I don't feel comfortable making that a criteria because I believe any person can read any standard at any point in time and determine it as offensive.
I would agree with you. So
it
I
don't want that to
invite someone, it invites the idea that someone is going to decide what is offensive.
Right, and so I'm not comfortable there, I'm very comfortable here.
What do you mean by transferable?
So we were talking about, okay, well, what if I can't decide if it's essential? We're throwing around some ideas and it certainly isn't exhaustive. But okay, if something is essential, does it provide foundation and build upon? Or sometimes does it provide knowledge or skill that you can transfer to other places? So does this transfer from social studies into science or science? Those are two very, or quick ideas. When I think of essential, these are two things that I think essential content skills do, but there may be other things. Are you there? So what is what we have focus on essential content skills, clear and concise, measurable. We agree the language here is not super awesome, but it's late in the day, expresses developmentally appropriate magnitude of thinking that we want students to be able to do, is equitable in its approach, and does not prescribe curricular instructional assessment methodology. I think that the scoring criteria we have so far.
The term that you used, key content, I think Jessica, did you have that kind of just,
So like
on
maybe
the
in concepts of,
you didn't say, right, and there was content here, and I like the word kind of key content, because whenever we're talking about, it's essential, but I think sometimes I want to say, like you're saying, get to the point, and some of the excessive wording that we talk about, which can get cumbersome.
Okay, but I'm gonna go back to that, yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, but I'm gonna say the audience, most, we're hearing essential all the time, that is something that is educators hear all the time, so that's not a word that for us, I think would create problems, even for new teachers coming out of college. However, I'm not opposed to using key or whatever, but I think essential are probably more of the vernacular. Essential is necessary.
Yeah,
It also implies
That's,
context.
It's,
yeah, I think, yeah.
I think essential also implies context that lets you expand or contract depending on what that particular item is talking about. It's
Well, we know we like to have these elements, so I think, as far as pilots learning and everything, we can have. In fact, I'll work on that, you guys can change it. I'll see if we can try it, I'll work on it, you guys tweak it how you want to, and that way we don't exhaust ourselves.
development standard and then run it through this process.
Right, and I make a motion.
It's the implementation, whether artists are.
Right, yes.
but I think this will be a really good way for when we don't agree.
Right.
We can move to here and kind of walk.
That's exactly what it's for. And then what you do is you separate into two groups and you have separate self-evaluations, that's what this is, self-evaluation.
It
And
also,
then you have disagreement, then you go through a process of reconciling the disagreement.
it also adds credibility to this process, in that we just didn't make stuff up.
That's right.
We legitimized it through a process.
I love that we've done this, I totally agree.
It should assist consistency.
Right.
So, who's the smart person? I don't know. That's good, that's good to say.
No, it's just,
Do
it's
we
because of
need
the
to
collective wisdom of the
save
group.
big pieces of paper for next time?
Mhm.
Would you like me to be the keeper of these, is that what you're volunteering to do?
I can be the
Keeper of the scroll.
I don't write it in terms of the general papers.
All right.
This thing.
I just pictures of that.
Okay, except.
Yeah, I think right here, this was our agenda for tomorrow, for next time, and it's one agenda item, because we've actually done this. So we will begin by reviewing sixth grade that Brian's gonna dump in for us.
Okay, I already have that.
Okay, and let's go over that. Prior to this was, just me visualizing rules at the end of the talk, and this was just our ideas about the programming, which, I know is just, I think, right. So I actually
That's
don't
it.
really have on the name. And then,
I was thinking about
and then I'll just, not to work on it, aggressive, paper, error. I've always had my like still with the teacher. They're gonna have to match the other words to picture. They're really good. No, this was important. So we don't, you can get it.
Yeah.
The Truman building was not available. Here.
This is convenient parking.
Yeah.
It's not good parking, but allows you to rent.
Okay.
Right, we went there today.
Jessica volunteered me to cancel us, or to send out communication about if we need to cancel because of that.
Oh, yeah.
So, is that okay? Would you like me as a facilitator to communicate out?
Yeah, just to do this,
Because of weather, that way I can give that one email out to everybody. So make sure that if you're considering that the weather is not okay, make sure you check everything else. I don't think we're gonna need to worry about September 10th. Anytime after the weather, it's already.
it is Missouri, so.
That's right.
I'm sensing the shutdown.
Yeah.
I was gonna move that we adjourn.
So, second.
Alex, seconds. All in favor?
Great work, everybody.
I will second that also.
Great work, everybody.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
It's a privilege to work with all of
Agreed.
you. There's a lot of standards documents around. We've been talking about them a lot. And I encourage you to pull off them. In case you want to go back to some other wording or models that we like. I don't think everybody signed it.
Oh, I did not.
I forgot it. So.
Thank you, Alex, for bringing your overhead.
Oh, yeah, that's
Great.
actually just in case.
Oh, okay, well, great, it was a great class.
I like it.
Yeah, I actually like that, yeah, I don't, I've said before, I don't like to work on students.
We're sharing the document, and I get a breath out, but I don't necessarily do that. So I can look them up everybody last time. But I was also.
You have this also.
We're sharing.
Oh, that's on the time, make sure we have our 11 today. I have the flags. Okay, should be 11.
It was here.
It's from the older projectors.
It is. We got some, I just was bought and they're like, this big.
They're tiny now.
They're great, they're just this big, dry.
Power strips?
No, yeah.
Oh!
We got those
The
builders like
small ones, yeah.
that big, not that tall. It's great, I love them.
Thank you, Mary.
And a video camera and a projector built into it. And it's just a little one like this. But yeah, records to memory. Projector.
That makes a lot of sense.
Even
Actually, my mom, today, dropped me off, has my little girl sticking in her brain. My younger sister lives here, and has, an nephew that she doesn't like them today.
I thought that was a projector.
Oh, gosh, yes. She's on
That's what I will, I definitely see it. No, I actually.
He has met her.
Yes.
She has to meet her.
She just has to sleep on me. It's terrible.
So it's just, she's the same age as her dad, and she really, and she doesn't like this either.
I got this morning, they're dropping off in the center, and, their friend is picking them up from school, and I just maybe and then there's.
It's too quiet.
So that one, I was thinking students.
Okay.
And then I've got to write everything that's different, we'll have to get this one. So it's just have to teach you. Absolutely.
And I will work with you. Thanks, Brian.
So you're a software developer. Is that correct? So you what kind of software you work on? For a company or your own company?
No, I'm consultant, so I go, get sent to one place maybe 3 months, maybe a couple years. No, I'm not, my absence is known. It makes it difficult. Actually, just a moment.
And you're from that area or not?
No, from originally born in Van Nuys outside of Vegas, when I was about 12. The 80s, playing the band in the West Coast area, and then I left. St. Charles. Been there pretty much the entire time since late 80s.
She said she's 4.
Fun stuff.
She slept between the ages of 2 and 3.
Wendy, should we talk to all about that recording form?
I don't think so. She sent it to you for approval, and then I was told that's the position to you.
Alex, are you staying put for a few minutes?
Might make sense to do it since we just.
Take it off?
Yes, definitely, and then I'll get it ready for approval before I set it in. Is that okay?
Then you have to be able to sit.
15.
And she doesn't sometimes they call 9, she has that.
She's not extremely great.
That's okay with you.
I find this out, last night was finishing up, because I just got that format.
You know, because she's right now.
But this time I've got everything already on there, so, because I.
Okay. So there's no rush to do it tonight.
No,
Y'all watching the World Series?
oh. I didn't know it.
World Series starts today.
I imagine it's so quite exciting.
All the mountains are blue. Yeah, that's pretty exciting. Royal flags hanging around. It's like, it's been a long time since you can see everybody without sports. Yeah. like in that universal way.
Right, you know, it goes.
And then you know, the use of once in a while, I guess.
I would say last year.
Did you ever do this?
Except for the playoff game.
Yeah.
I think it's high. So right time, the design wise, it's either team really got.
Yeah.
Some people are. It's not like baseball.
And we're just again, national to 15 weeks old, and then 36 weeks, and they were hopefully resuscitated.
So 15 weeks. So almost.
Right, and then they start, and then I got my first 3 hours. And then I think I started like, yeah, and that took me about 5 minutes, because pregnancy is.
I was questioning it after last. I really was. So I do this.
So, all gonna go into the order, or is it just like you're just submitting for questions? You don't go, you don't do.
Yeah, and so I was super that.
That's why I asked that.
Anyway, so. And so
It's there
you know. And so, yeah.
Well, yeah, you're.
So what's going on?
Girls are here, everybody.
I usually do that by nine, careful. Usually, well, you don't read to her at night. We don't always have a bad time. Maybe she didn't do more bad time in the evening with her. But the boys, their homework dominates my sleep.
It's supposed to be very common.
Yeah.
And I think that's,
I think that's a good plan, and the other thing is
Can sometimes call,
okay.
and I just think the regularity of that we're gonna do the same thing, the same steps.
Yes, and I usually do like that, just to do it myself. I get tired, you know, you just,
Different
But I
things
mean-
are relaxing, areas like that, and there's different things that have foods that are good for you.
well, she likes a lot of investigating.
And then, the different kinds of foods for stimulus and the different kinds of foods for calming and helping and see.
That's right.
I mean, she's not hyper, she just.
Noise is also.
Point to catch it, it's like one.
Yeah. A fan or something that runs, yeah. All those
Here.
things.
So this was.
And I put today's dates on this. So you have the, thumb drive?
I do. As a person, you know, like, which one of them is that correct?
Was that this, yeah.
I don't know, we asked yesterday for rooms because the dates, she said December 2nd might be a problem, but she'll see what she can do, just in getting rooms in general,
Uh-huh.
but
But no numbers,
she doesn't have any numbers yet.